In lesson 213, we are going to learn about what's my rule using input-output tables. You will need your whiteboard marker and eraser, and your math journal. So as always, we'll go ahead and begin warming up. If you do not know your multiplication facts, you'll also want to grab your multiplication chart. So on your whiteboard, would you please number 1 and number 2. I want you to find number 1 to find multiples of 2 starting with 8. So we're going to find the next 5 multiples. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 multiples. I'll give you the first 2 just to get you started. Find multiples of 2 starting with 8. So they want you to start with 8 and find the next 4. So 8, 10, what would come next? And then find multiples of 5 starting with 25. And you need to find 4 more in a row. Would you please go ahead and find the next 4 multiples of each number? Remember to go ahead and stop or pause the video as needed. So on my multiplication chart, if I look across this 2 starting at 8, it would be 8, 10, 12, 14, and 16. Looking at multiples of 5 starting with 25 would be 25, 30, 35, 40, and 45. Go ahead and erase your whiteboard. Next, we're going to write 5 multiples of each of the following numbers. So we're going to find multiples of 4, but starting with 16. So multiples of 4 starting with 16. So you're going to find the next 4 since I started you off with the first one. Find multiples of 6 starting with 12. Would you go ahead, write down the first multiple, and then the next 4 multiples after that. Go ahead and pause your video. Use your multiplication chart by looking across your row of 4s and 6s. All right, multiples of 4 starting with 16, 16, 20, 24, 28, and 32. Find multiples of 6 starting with 12, 12, 18, 24, 30, and 36. Those are all multiples. Now, today what we're going to do is look at what's my rule. So we have 4 different input, output, or what's my rule tables, and I'm going to begin with the first one. Sometimes they give you the rule, and they give you the number that went in the machine. So imagine there's a little machine here. Wish I were in class with you. And there's a place where a number goes in. So 30 goes in and something happens inside. Craziness happens. And when it comes out, it's a different number. And in this particular machine, each time a number goes in, they subtract 15. So I actually will demonstrate this if I were in person, but unfortunately I cannot do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at 30. For each number that we have, we're going to subtract 15. So if I subtract 15 from 30, out comes 15. For 90, if I subtract 15, out comes 75. I would like you to do the next 2. So on your whiteboard, take 65, subtract 15, and take 110 and subtract 15. Pause your video and figure out what happens and what would be the output number. So 65 minus 15 is 50. And 110 minus 15 is 95. So sometimes we're given the rule and we're given the number that went in. Let's try a different type of what's my rule table. This time, this is type 2. We're still given the rule, But this time, we're given the number that comes out. So since we're working the opposite direction, we know that a number that goes in, they add 100. But guess what? We're going the opposite direction, so we're actually going to do the opposite to get what went in to begin with. So if I have my little machine and something happens inside, which we know is adding 100, we need to figure what went in it. That 350 came out. So we're going to work the opposite direction. So we're going to subtract 100 to get what they started with. So we take 350 and we're doing the opposite since we already have the number that came out. If I subtract 100, 250 went in. Now, does that make sense? 250 plus 100 equals 350? Absolutely. So what would 120 be if I subtracted 100? 20. Now let's see, does that make sense? If the rule is add 100, I started with 20, they add 100, does that give you 120? Absolutely. I would like you to figure out what are the next two numbers. So remember, we're going to do the opposite. So 665 minus 100 and 421 minus 100. Go ahead and figure it out. What went in? So in the case of 665, 565 went in. Really only subtracting 1 from the hundreds place. And 421 minus 100 would be 321. So that's our second type of what's my rule. The next type, type 3, is where you're given the number that went in, the number that went out, but you have to figure out the rule. And remember, whatever the rule is, it has to apply to every situation. So I could look at number 1 and say, oh, 49 minus 7. Let's see. 9 minus 7 is 2. 4 minus nothing is 4. Oh, they added 42. But then I have to look at the second one. Did they add 42 to get 14? Nope, so that doesn't work. So whatever work has to work for each and every one. So look at times 7, times 7, times 7, times 7. The rule is multiply by 7. So sometimes we have to figure out what the rule is. And the last and final type of what's my rule input-output chart is sometimes we're given the input number, sometimes we're given the output number, sometimes we're given one or the other, and we have to figure out the rule. So in this one, a pound of something costs $3.75. So I know that if I'm doing 2 pounds, I must have to add that twice. So if 1 pound is $3.75, what would 2 pounds be? Well, I bring my decimal point straight down. I'm going to go ahead and add that. Guess what? It's $7.50. Now I'm going to skip the next one for a minute because that's the opposite direction. So instead of adding $3.75, I would have to subtract. So let's go ahead. Well, the next one, if you were in school, I would actually allow you to use your calculator. These are just practice ones so you can see. But if I took 1875 and divided it by the $3.75, I would let you use your calculator. I can't put a calculator on here, but if you were on your iPad to take a calculator and you were to take $18.75 divided by $3.75 a pound, you would get 5 pounds. And I would again let you, if I were at school, I'd say, you know what, go ahead and use your multiplication. or your calculator for this one. So I would take 11 times $3.75 a pound, and I would get $41.25. So this one is that a pound is $3.75. So that one's a little more challenging. I don't think it's the best example, but we'll do some practice in our math journals. So we're going to go ahead and open our journal to page 63. At the top it says, what's my rule? So go ahead and open to page 63. We'll see different types of input-output what's my rule table. It says complete the what's my rule table and explain the patterns you found. Here is the rule. This asterisk also means multiplying. Sometimes you also see a dot like this. It all means to multiply. Now notice, they give us the number that came out. So what you're going to do is to figure out what happens when you divide by 5, because we have to figure out the opposite since we are given the output. So if you go across your 5s on your multiplication chart and go across till you get to 25, go straight up, and you would get 5. Do the same thing again. Go across your 5s on your multiplication chart until you get to 30. Stop, and then go straight up. What do you multiply 5 by to give you 30? 6. Go across your 5s again. We're only working the 5s because the rule is times 5, so we're just going to work the opposite direction. So go across the 5s until you get to 60. Once you go across your 5s until you get to 60, then go straight up. 5 times what would give me 60? 12. 12 times 5 is 60. Now, the next two are a little more challenging because they're not basic facts. But if I took 17 times 5, it would give me 85. And 20 times 5 is 100. What patterns now do I see? Well, here's a pattern that I see. I see if it's an even number, it has an even product. Even number, even product. Even number, even product. Watch this. Odd number, odd product. Odd number, odd product. Product means the answer when you multiply. So even numbers, go ahead and write this on journal, page 63. Even numbers have even products, or what we would call answers when you multiply. And odd numbers have odd answers or products. Product just means the answer when you multiply. The next one has two things that you need to do to it. You're going to first of all multiply by 2 and then add 1. So there's two things. You're going to multiply by 2 and then you'll add 1. That's the rule. So if 2 went in, 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. Now we'll take 5 times 2, which is 10, plus 1 is 11. 24 times 2, or 24 doubled, is 24, and then add 1, 25. Remember to be filling out page 63 with me. What is 30 doubled, or times 2? Well, 3 times 2 is 6, and add 1 0 behind it. But remember, sorry about that, I got ahead of myself. We have to add 1 to it. So double it, which is 60, plus 1 is 61. Now, ignore the 0 for just a second. What is 11 doubled, or 11 times 2? 22. And then we would put the 0 on the end, so now we won't ignore it. 0, and then 1 more is 1. 221. What do I notice and pattern? Odd number. Odd. Odd numbers are numbers that end in 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Odd. Odd number. Odd number. So all numbers are odd, meaning that they end in a 1, 3, 5, 7, or 9. All right, let's do one more together. This looks very similar to what we've done previously. There are 12 inches in a foot. So you're going to be using your 12s on your multiplication chart. If we're moving this direction, we're multiplying by 12. But if we have the output, we are dividing by 12. Okay. So let's go ahead with 10. 10 times 12 or 12 times 1 is 12 with 1 0 behind it. Now look across your 12s. Go to the very bottom until you get to 204. Well, guess what? We don't go that high. So again, if I were at school, I would say go ahead and on your calculator, find a calculator. We're just going to divide by 12. So take 204 on a calculator, divide it by 12. You get 17. And we could do that same thing. 720 divided by 12. And I would let kids use their calculators at school for this one. Equals 60. Okay, let's just make up one here. How about 5? Let's take 5, go across your 5s so you get to 5 times 12, or go across your 12 till you get 12 times 5. 12 times 5 is 60. Notice this? Even number, even number, even number, even number, even number. All output numbers are even. All output numbers are even. You are going to go ahead and look in your Schoology folder to see what else you need to do for lesson 213.